If you work with children on the autism spectrum, and specifically if you work with children who are Gestalt language processors, this episode is for you. This week, I am going to share with you an intervention strategy that I've used, that I've researched, that is highly effective. I want you to go ahead and try it in your own practice. Let me give you a little background. Last week, we talked about assessment of Gestalt language processing. We talked about the importance of looking at the percentage of utterances that are spontaneous. As the child gets older, we want to see more and more utterance spontaneous and a lower percentage of those utterances being Gestalts. However, I emphasize again, as I've emphasized in the last episode, Gestalts are good. This is how children learn language. And the research indicates that at younger ages, that even the verbally fluent children use Gestalt language as a means of learning how to talk. This week, I had the inspiration for this episode because one of my CIS members sent me an awesome email, and she said, I love hearing about the research and how to assess Gestalt from our last episode, episode 134. And she said, could you tell me about the intervention? How do I use the treatment target paragraphs? The treatment target paragraphs are in my CIS membership, and they are exclusive to CIS members, the language paragraphs. I wanted to share with her how I do this, and I want to share with you how I do this so that you can try this in your own practice. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I haven't always done this approach. In the past, I did what everyone else does. I did what we learned in college over 20 years ago, which is the +1. If the child is not speaking, then you speak at the single word level. If the child is speaking at the single word level, you speak at the phrase level. If the child's speaking at the phrase level, you speak at the sentence level. The child speaking at the sentence level, you speak at the expanded sentence level, the compound sentence level, the complex sentence level. You just take what the child's doing and you +1. It is something that works. It's something that works. Okay. Now, what happened is by accident, I developed the strategy that I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to give you a little story behind that. I had a summer speech boot camp, and this was for children with articulation impairment, with speech sound disorders, and we would have 5 45-minute sessions, and we would work on these speech sounds. So that is what the boot camp was geared toward, simply treating speech sound disorders. And what we were doing is we were doing an experiment in which we were giving this complex paragraph to these students to accelerate their gains, which were chock full of 3-element clusters. Within this program that was geared for children who solely had speech sound disorders, a lot of my kiddos with autism wanted to sign up for it. So I thought, well, let's treat their speech sound disorders. We're always treating language when it comes to autism. But let's go ahead and give them this paragraph in the speech sound disorders because they have articulation issues as well. So let's see what happens when we do that. Most of my great gains have happened through failures or by accidents, and this is a case in which that was the case. So with these children in my summer program, which was an enrichment program, I said, let's work on speech with these children. Well, what happened? These children not only made immense gains by working on the paragraph with them in speech, but they also made immense gains in language. So the children with autism made these dramatic gains after 5 sessions in their speech articulation and also in their mean length of utterance. How long were their utterances? How complex were their utterances? And that's because in our approach, we gave them a paragraph to work with. So this was by accident. This was a program that I had developed for children who only had articulation impairments. However, because there was an interest from the children with autism, I said, why not? Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. They have some speech impairments as well. I'm just always treating the language with them because I'm thinking language first, then speech. This is the way it goes. So what happened is they made huge gains after 5 sessions in their speech and language. Then after the summer, I took my speech target paragraph and I created a language target paragraph, which is a way of telling a story in which you're using first, next, then, lastly, because. With that language target paragraph, we would read the paragraph before we engaged in the movement activity. It's kind of like if you're playing a board game and you read the card, okay, past 10 spaces, then go and collect $100, right? Before you take your turn in the movement activity, we have a routine in which you always read the card first. Okay, first pick the sticker and da 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 da. So we would read the card, and I would read the paragraph card every time before the child took the turn in the movement activity. Then I would backpedal a little bit. So the last word of the paragraph, I would pause, wait 3 to 5 seconds, and sometimes the child would go ahead and say the word. If they didn't, I would just go ahead and say it myself. Now, in the past, don't do what I do. You can learn from my mistakes. In the past, I learned about this expectant pause. And the expectant pause was you make your eyes really big and you open your mouth and you breathe in and you wait for the child to say it like ready, set, right? And that was the expectant pause. And the child fills in and says the last word of the completion prompt. No, 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 not like that. Instead, I simply wait. If the child fills in, okay. If the child doesn't, it doesn't. Don't even make eye contact. It's a bit overwhelming. Just keep it low key, keep it light. So I read the paragraph, boop, 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 wait, boop, boop. Okay. And I say the word. If they don't, if they do, I don't make a big deal about it. If they say the word, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I've done in the past. Because if I make a big deal about it, then you have sort of this stuttering approach avoidance dilemma going on. You put a lot of pressure. And if the child doesn't say the word, then the child doesn't receive the claps and the tickles and the praise and the object too. You put too much on it. So then they avoid it. They don't want to risk losing the reward. It's loss aversion. We don't like losing things that we have. You never want it to be that if you don't say the word, no tickles, no swing, no claps and attention. And if you do say it, then you get all of that, because then you have the approach avoidance paradigm in which they will avoid talking because they don't know if the word's going to come out or not. This is seen in inconsistency. There's differences in many children with autism, the cerebellum, in which sometimes the speech can come and sometimes the speech cannot. And that's also been seen in children who stutter. Let's get back to my story in the paragraph. So I go back and I do the paragraph with this child who is not talking. I start him off with the look at sentence strip. Look at, and then I have my little sticker for my membership, whatever the word is that we have there. So it might be a teddy bear, in the activity that we're using. That might be the toy. So no pressure over time. Look, they might read it themselves. When they start saying words on the sentence strip, then I jump. I don't do any of that +1 stuff that I've done in the past. Instead, I go right to my paragraph. So with the paragraph, I keep it light, and every time before they take the turn, I read the paragraph. Now, when I read the paragraph, I'm pointing to the word. I'm using gestures as well, which shows them how to say the words and to show the visual reference of what the words I'm saying, major charades using multi-sensory cueing. I'm using exaggerated speech. So basically, I'm embracing the Gestalt. If we think about Gestalts, children show us in their first words, this is how I learn language. I learn what is presented to me in a multisensory manner. I learn what is presented to me animated. I learn what is presented to me when it is paired with print. This is how I learn language. Take that. I pair that with this treatment target that I use repetitively. I'm saying the same treatment target every single time. It's the same card if you're playing a game. And you're drawing the same card every single time, the same routine. And why is that? Because giving them that consistency that they need to develop automaticity. Now we're talking about motor planning, motor programming, motor execution, and we're talking about the importance of automaticity. It's kind of like when you first ride a bike and you're paying attention to the handlebars, and you're paying attention to the pedals, and you're paying attention to whether you're swinging back and forth. You haven't developed automaticity yet. You have to do more of that same motor plan, motor program, motor execution for it to automatically develop. We want to develop automaticity. We're using the same card every time. In the beginning, I'm reading it. I'm using the gestures. I'm doing it at a slow pace, and that's to give the child time to perceive the words and to join me in production. Now, I'm pausing every now and then. They're jumping in. I'm pausing more and more and more and more the more they're talking. And eventually, they're saying the whole paragraph by themselves. And all along, it's important to remember there is no pressure. This is a game, okay? Keep it that like light, fun, gamey head, joyful, not what I've done in the past, which is this high expectation, wide eyes, holding your breath. No, 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 none of that. This is light, fun. This is just what we do every single time, right? Now, after they say the entire paragraph by themselves, what I find is just like with the other kids, just like in speech, you have a cascading impact in which the child is naturally speaking in sentences and phrases. You didn't need to teach them that. It naturally developed because you're working on a paragraph. And through a cascading impact, you're going to hear things come out naturally that no one has ever taught them. And that's when things get really this is when my career made a huge turn in which I was no longer, as Lynn Williams was saying, taking a chisel to the rock, +1, +1, +1, and slowly making the gains. Instead, I took fireworks to the rock. And I took fireworks to the rock by working on the paragraph. After we went from this look at sentence strip, and why did we do the look at sentence strip? Because these children in their first words were commenting. These children were pointing when they were making their first words. And why is that so important? Because comments are worth a lot more than requests. Children who comment, and when I mean content, when you point to something, what you're doing is you're asking for someone's attention. You're making a bid at joint attention. These are children who have better outcomes at elementary age. Request does not have that prognostic power that we know that comments do. When I moved from the I want sentence strip to a look at sentence strip, the children's first words weren't requests. The children's first words became comments. Language is very, very powerful. As William LaBeouf would say, it is a container of our thought. Right after that, I said, let's go. Let's go bigger. Go home. We're going right to the paragraph. What was happening is after the children could independently see the beginning to the end of the paragraph, and then we go and engage in our movement activity, what would happen right after that is natural speech development. Remember the first time this happened after my summer program, and I brought it into my fall speech therapy, right? So you have to remember, this happened by accident. This was a program that I developed for children with articulation impairment. It was called Speech Sound Disorder Boot Camp. All we're working on is artic, 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 artic. And I had children with autism enroll in that program. This was not planned. And normally I would work on language because they have autism but I'm not worried about how clearly they talk. I'm worried that they're talking. I'm just going to work on functional language with them. But instead I said, well, let's go ahead and work on speech with them and give them the paragraph and see how they do. Let's see what happens when we do that. It was an accident. And by that accident, I made a great discovery. And the reason I only know about this discovery is because I research my practice. I pay attention to the details. I pay attention to the numbers. I look at the pre and post data, and I take one variable at a time and I manipulate that variable. And what I found is if I was working with a sentence with these kiddos, if I was working with a paragraph with these kiddos, I would get much, 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 much greater gains in speech and language if I used a paragraph. So I used a paragraph, but not only for the children with speech sound disorders. The greatest gains were for the children with autism, the children who that program was not built for. So with the children with autism, this is what happened. This is the first story I remember. And I remember I was doing a painting, shaving cream activity, glue, glitter, everything messy, and it gets all over me. It's in my hair, it's in my apron, it's on everything. And this child I worked with, when the beginning of the school year, wasn't even talking. He was a 4-year-old and he didn't speak at all, wasn't talking at all. Very bright child, but didn't talk at all. And we were doing the paragraph, and then he started reading the paragraph. He's reading it all by himself. And he came in the next day. And he was like, "Why do you have paint all over your arm?" I just looked at him like, I'm like, "'Cause I'm painting." And he looked at me like, "You need to wash that off." With the intonation, like, "Why are you so weird?" "Why are you covered in paint? And why aren't you washing that off?" And this was a child. I'm like, "Wait a minute, you're the one with autism, not me with autism." I mean, I say that jokingly, but this is a child where none of that was taught. I never taught why questions to him. I, I never taught intonation with him. This naturally developed to a cascading impact. So that was the story behind what I do today. And I want you to try this out for yourself. These paragraphs are exclusively for my SIS membership, but I give you my secret sauce. I gave you my methodology. If you've tried speech targets, you see, oh my goodness, look at this. When I work on speech targets that are 3-element S-blends, I get much, much greater gains than if I was simply to work on the S sound. If you've tried out what I've suggested, you've seen the impact for yourself firsthand. Your numbers don't lie. The experience, the qualitative data doesn't lie. It's right there at your fingertips. You see that the treatment target matters. And the more complex the treatment target, not just for children with phonological processes, look at the research for diverse groups of children with speech sound disorders, the better the gains. So we have that. Now we're looking at language. Who in the field of language is getting the greatest gains? I'll tell you who's getting the greatest gains. Trina Spencer and Douglas Peterson are with their storytelling interventions. The more complex the treatment target, the greater the gains, period. And I don't want you to say, well, that's just for the children who have expressive language delay, or that's just for the children that even have developmental language disorder. You are going to find, if you research your practice, all children benefit from more complex treatment targets. We need to stop being a gatekeeper and asking the question, can they do this? And instead ask the question, how? How can they do this? And they can do this with multimodal cueing, with multi-sensory cueing. Embrace the Gestalt. I have this in print, this paragraph. I have this paragraph in pictures here. I have this paragraph in exaggerated intonation. I have this paragraph at a slower rate. I have this paragraph paired with gestures that illustrate how to talk and also the language concepts behind what we're saying. I'm going multisensory with this, and I'm giving these children with this complex target every single cue I have in my toolbox at a maximum level of prompting. Then what am I doing? I'm pulling some of those tools away as the child no longer needs it. This is what it's about. It's just like people look at this and they go, what is this? This isn't functional. This isn't natural. No, this is embracing how children with autism learn language in the neurodiverse manner they learn language and capitalizing on that. If you want to teach a child with autism how to talk, don't pay attention to the professors in the university. Don't even pay attention to me. Don't even pay attention to the research. Pay attention to the children who are learning to talk. The children who are learning to talk in their first words, in their first sentences, they are going to teach you, this is how I learn. This is what's easy for me, and this is what's hard for me. So what we're going to want to do is cap that. By cap that, that means capitalize on that. So I want you to take all of this information, and I love it because this cis member, she emailed me and she wrote, Kelly, I loved this episode on Gestalt speech and assessing Gestalt speech. I want to roll up my sleeves. She literally wrote this, which makes me drool. And she says, and I want to start changing children's lives today. Share with me how I can use the paragraph and capitalize on Gestalt language processing to optimize gains and to change lives. I thought this is worth talking about. And this is worth you rolling up your sleeves and making the world a better place, one child at a time. You will always be first.